Perspective. Perspective is a word that I've grown to appreciate in my life. It's a word that, God, I think, is one of the only people that can give me a perspective sometimes that I need to have. And here's what I love about perspective, because I race through my life and I'm not always thinking about everything, and God will graciously stop me to give me that perspective. And when he does, I love it because that perspective usually always leads to an appreciation. And so when we stop and gain this perspective on people that have given their lives so that you and I could wake up in this country and be here, it's when we come to church, it's not just coming to church, we can appreciate being able to be at church because of what they've done. So let's just give another round of applause for God and those people that have done that, because it's such a great honor, such a great honor. And I appreciate being able to be here today at Central Campus. My name is Michael Singer. I am one of the pastors here at Freedom House. I'm also on our teaching team, which just means we have live communicators at every campus. And I'm typically at our Lake Norman campus. However, I've been at Freedom House for a long time, so when I come back to Central Campus, I get to see some of the old school people that I knew that I miss. So it is an honor to be here and to meet some new faces and new people. So thank you for having me. Even if you didn't want me here, they were going to have me here anyway. But thank you for welcoming me here. Well, hey, we've been in this great series on Esther, and before I get into that, I also want to honor everyone watching live stream. The great thing I love about traveling and people going here and there is that they can still catch church. Specifically, they can still be a part of Freedom House. And so let's do an online roll call of who is watching with us today. We have California, Georgia, Kentucky, North Carolina, New York, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Texas, Virginia, and Vermont. Y'all make a hand for all of our live streamers. Thank you for being here with us today. Today we're wrapping up this series called Restored. It's all about Esther, the book of Esther in the Bible. And Esther's great because Esther is set during a time called the diaspora. On the count of three, everybody, I want everybody to shout that word. 1, 2, 3, diaspora. That word just means dispersed. It's a time for the children of Israel, the Jewish people, where they no longer are their own people with their own king. They've been taken over and beaten and conquered, and now they've been dispersed amongst these different kingdoms all throughout the kingdom and the different provinces that each kingdom is in control over. And this is where we pick up and we hear and we find the story of Esther. And this story is all about restoration. That's why we named this series Restored. And what I love about God is that God is in the business of restoration. That's what he does. That's part of his nature, part of his character. It's part of what he is doing all the time. His desire is to see restoration in our lives individually, but also corporately as a whole. He likes to see restoration. It was no different with the children of Israel. And what I love about God is that typically when he operates in his restoration, he loves to use some of the most unlikely candidates. And if you read the Bible, you will find that he uses some of the most unlikely people. And Esther, the book of Esther, is no different because he uses this lady named Esther that on paper you would not think would be the person that he would use to restore, but God always uses the unlikely. When I think about restoration in my life, one of the things that stands out is that restoration, it just takes time to be restored. Whether it be an individual area or something holistic, it just takes time for restoration to happen. And when I think about time is a little interesting because time is like its own entity. Time, you and I and many of the things around us will pass away, but time will not. Time will just keep going. Do you know that time does not care that I was born in Louisiana? It doesn't care about my mama. It don't care about my daddy. It don't care who my uncle is, my cousin is. It don't matter what my house looked like, how I grew up, my socioeconomic status. Time does not care about any of that for you or for me. Time is not a respecter of persons. Time just does what time wants to do, and it keeps moving. You ever heard somebody say, ooh, be careful, don't pray for patience, because if you pray for patience, God's going to give you an opportunity to grow in that patience. Do you know what patience involves? Time. It takes time to be patient. There's a book in the Bible called Ecclesiastes, and I believe it's chapter 3, but it talks about time and how there's a time for this, that, the other, and it lays out all these things that there is a time for. Time can involve moments that are fun, happy, enjoyable. Man, this is great. But time can also have moments where it's tough, it's hard, there's sickness, there's sorrow, there's pain, there's suffering. How many of you in here, by show of hands, are familiar with the movie Back to the Future? Michael J. Fox, back in the day. Okay. That was all about going back in time. And whatever they altered back in time, it affected the present. When they went back to the present from the past, it was all about this idea of time. I don't know if you've ever had this thought come to your head, I'm going to make up for lost time. Or one that I love, I'm going to catch up on sleep. Is that possible? I don't think it's possible. I get the intent behind making up for lost time and the heart behind it and catching up on sleep. But logically, we can't make up for lost time because time not waiting around for us. Whatever happened in that time's gone. The only thing we can do is take advantage of the current moment we have and say that, hey, that back then I should have done something better, but now I have this time to have an opportunity to do that better. We can't make up for it, and we sure can't catch up on sleep. We can get more rest in the current time than we are, but we can't catch up on that time or that sleep. A common aspect about time that I find myself in many conversations and thinking about often is how quickly and fast time moves. How many of y'all just thought to yourself, I cannot believe June is right here. Like we're almost halfway through with this year. Many years ago, I used to just simply think that time went faster the busier you got. So as I got older and had more responsibility and got married and we started having kids and was working, and it just felt like there were so many things going on that's why time's moving fast, because just all the stuff that's going on. Until I had a conversation with my grandfather. This was probably at least around 15 years ago, and I'm talking to my grandfather, and you need to understand the context of my grandfather's life before I tell you the comment he made to me about time. My grandfather at that time had emphysema. He had an oxygen tank that he had to have on him to have oxygen. He said that whenever he would simply brush his teeth, that he would be so exhausted it felt like he had just run a marathon. And my grandfather, when I was sharing with him about life and how busy it was, and I just say, man, it feels like time's flying by so fast. He said, well, let me tell you something, grandson. I just want to let you in on a secret. Time, as you get older, is going to keep moving faster and faster. And in that moment, I realized I was wrong. Time moving fast has nothing to do with how busy we are. Because my grandfather, who wasn't able to do anything hardly in life, he was talking about how every day and every year time got faster and faster. And it's simply because the older we get. Don't ask me why. I don't know why it feels that way. I don't know if it's because we're getting closer to the end of our life and there is really less time. I don't really know what the answer is, but I do know that time is this powerful entity. And I think one of the things and one of the reasons time is so powerful is because time doesn't just lapse, it reveals. Time doesn't just go by. It does do that. But I think as it goes by, one of the most powerful things it does is it begins to reveal things about us, and it begins to reveal things around us. So I thought today, as we look at the story of Esther, we would talk about three of the main people in this story. And we would look at who they are in the story and talk about what does time reveal through these different people. The first person I want to look at is a gentleman by the name of Mordecai. And with Mordecai, we see that time reveals our heart. Time reveals our heart. Mordecai is part of the smallest tribe of Israel, the Benjamites. He's actually Esther's older cousin. And so what happened, Esther growing up, her mom and dad passed away. And do you know that this older cousin, Mordecai, stepped in to take care of her when she did not have a mother or a father? At the time, Mordecai is mentioned and around the king is looking for a new queen, and Esther has been part of that looking process, and she finds herself in the king's court, basically going through the process for the king to find a new queen. And Mordecai sits out regularly by the king's gate, And he gets intel from these different servants that are dealing with Esther. And he gets intel on what's going on, how are things going with her. And one day as he is sitting there, he has this encounter in Esther chapter 2, verse 21. It says, in those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry. And they sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther. And Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. I want you to remember that. What he did to tell the king about these two men plotting to kill him, it was basically recorded in history right there. It was written down. Now, why in the world did Mordecai choose to tell on these guys and to protect the king that he had guys that were trying to kill him? Did he do it because he just understood honor? This wasn't Mordecai's king. This guy was not an Israelite. He wasn't a Jew. So he could have easily just been like, ooh, that's their problem. You ever been around somebody's situation or been around like two people fighting and you're like, oh boy, that's their problem. I'm going to just walk away and let them deal with that. He could have easily just fluffed it off and said, I don't even want to be here. I don't even like these people. They're not my people. I don't even want to be around them. But he didn't. Mordecai's a guy that we see his heart right out the gate. He took care of his little cousin. He didn't have to do that, but he took care of his cousin. And then we see him in this moment understanding what I think is the position of this king and just going, you know what? You shouldn't talk about that authority like that. He's the king, no matter whether or not I agree with what he's saying. And so I'm going to make sure that the king knows that there are people that are plotting on him. Either way, we get a picture, and time reveals the heart of Mordecai. That Mordecai is a guy who is just, and Mordecai is a guy that his heart is really cares for more than just himself. You see, Mordecai was really operating in a biblical principle, a quality and a characteristic of God that he tells us to operate in, and it's this, that we should not only look out for our own interests, but we should look out for the interest of others. This is the heart that we see that's revealed with Mordecai. As the story goes on, we get to this point where Esther is going to have this feast. She's going to have it for the king and the king's right-hand man, Haman. And when they're done with the feast, the king is going to bed and he's having some trouble going to sleep. And it says that this happened in Esther chapter 6 with the king. On that night, the king could not sleep, and he gave orders to bring the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written how Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold, and who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor or distinction has been bestowed upon Mordecai for this? The king's young men who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. Do you know what the king did? He took his royal robes and he gave them, put them on Mordecai. He got one of his horses, his royal horses, and he put a royal head drape on the horse. And he put Mordecai on top of that horse. And then he went into the town square. And he had someone walk Mordecai around on this horse. And as they walked Mordecai around, he had them point up at Mordecai and say, you see this man? This is the type of man that the king chooses to honor. Mordecai, his heart, as time passed, led him to a place where he was honored by the king at the highest level. But do you know that when Mordecai made that decision to call out these guys trying to kill the king, that he wasn't sitting there going, oh man, I wonder how I can get in better with the king. I wonder how I can just tell Esther, and maybe Esther can get some, good in and be close with the king, and maybe that'll pay off for me later. He wasn't looking for a payoff. You ever done something for someone and time passes and they don't return the favor, or they don't want to do it for you, or you ask them to help you, maybe you help them move, and you ask them and it's like crickets, ghost town, they're nowhere to be found? You know how frustrating that can be? Or maybe in marriage, you make deposits into that love bank and you want to get a return on that. Maybe you let them do stuff and now you want to go away on a vacation and they don't want you to go and you just were putting stuff in to try to get something back. That's not the heart that's revealed in Mordecai. His heart is, I'm going to be just and do the right thing because this is what God has called me to. I'm going to do it just to do it, but I love how as time passes, his heart is honored. I wonder what God is asking us to do right now in the lives of other people just for the right heart, and maybe later he wants to honor us in a significant way or do something in our life in a significant way. I love how Proverbs 27:19 talks about this idea of time always reveals our heart. It says, as water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. We see this in Mordecai. We see his heart, we see the way that time unfolded, and we see the way that he was honored just because he chose to have a heart like God, and he chose to honor and to treat those around him as they should be treated and looked out for those other people. So with Mordecai, we learn that time will always reveal our heart. So let's look at another gentleman in the story, a gentleman by the name of Haman. Because when we look at Haman, we will see that time reveals our character. Now, Haman is the right-hand man to the king. He's the chief guy. He has been given a throne above all the other officials, so he is the top dog next to the king. The king commanded all the servants at the gate, anytime you see Mordecai come by, you have to bow down in his presence and pay him homage. Same thing I do when Pastor Adam walks by. I just bow in his presence and pay him homage. Matter of fact, during the work week, I'm mostly on my knees out in the lobby. Just, will you please stop walking by so I can get off my knees, Pastor Adam? Everybody had to pay him homage. But there was one person who didn't bow down to him. It was Mordecai. Well, some of the other servants used to beg Mordecai, hey man, you got to do this. The king told us we had to do this. You're going to get in trouble if you don't. And Mordecai stood his ground. He wasn't going to bow to a man. He would only bow to God. So he stood his ground, and word got back to Haman. Hey, this guy Mordecai, he's not going to bow down to you. And matter of fact, he's a Jewish guy. And so Haman has this interaction in Esther chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. When I hear that statement about Haman, it reveals his character, and it reveals a specific character trait that he has: pride. Pride is never settled with just the next step. Pride wants to take out and destroy as much as it can. You ever been around somebody that they're just like prideful, they're just boastful, it's all about them, they're like cocky and brash, and when they're talking, it's just like a bunch of I, look what I did, listen to what I did, listen to how great I am, look what I can do, I got. You ever been around somebody like that? And if we haven't been around somebody like that, then we are that person. So you figure out what it is for you. You might want to think of somebody quickly. And it's easy to think about pride in that way. And when I think about pride in that way, very simply I can go, gosh, man, Haman, man, he was a wreck. I've never been like that. Like mad with somebody and wanting to take out a whole group of people just to like make it worse because one person wasn't enough for me. I've just never been like that. But then God stops me and he says, Michael, you understand that is maybe an overt picture of pride, but pride creeps in all the little nuances of life. Because when we look at pride from God's lens and what the Bible talks about pride, we ultimately see that, simply put, pride is anything that is selfishly motivated by me, anything that I'm trying to accomplish and gain for myself, anything that I want to get and that I want to have so that I can be the one. It's all about me. I'll give you an example of a little nuance of where pride can show up. You ever been in a disagreement with someone? A friend, a coworker, a spouse, or whatever. You're in this disagreement. And you don't let go of the disagreement and you share your point. And the reason why you're sharing your point is not necessarily to make your point anymore, but it's just to be right. That silence tells me that we've all done that. I've done it. And if you're married, you probably know this very well, is that you're going back and forth, and eventually what you're talking about doesn't matter. All that matters is who's going to be right and who's going to leave being right. You know what I've learned that is? That's pride. And I'll tell you, it doesn't mean that you don't disagree with people. It doesn't mean you don't share your perspective or your point of view. It doesn't mean you don't have conflict. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when you get to that place where you realize that we're just trying to be right, be the bigger person and just let it go. And it can help out a lot of things. Haman, he wanted to take out everybody. It was Haman's world, and he was not satisfied with just taking out Mordecai, but he also wanted to take out all of the Jews. You remember that little feast that happened where I told you the king couldn't sleep, and he went home and had the history books read to him? Well, Haman was at that feast, and Haman left that feast, and Haman was in good spirits, man. Like, I just had dinner with the queen and king. Nobody else had that. He had good spirits until he saw Mordecai. And when he saw Mordecai, remember, Mordecai's like, whatever, Haman. Most of the servants would flinch when Haman would come by and then bow down. Mordecai just stood there like, what? He didn't bow. He didn't do nothing. Haman went from having the greatest night of his life to being more furious than anything else. He was ready to do something to Mordecai, but he chose not to. He went home and he got his wife and all his friends. He called them all around, and here's what happened. Here's what Haman did. We had everybody around in Esther chapter 5, verse 11. Then Haman described for them his glorious wealth and his many sons. He told them all how the king had honored him and promoted him in rank over the other officials and the royal staff. What's more, Haman added, Queen Esther invited no one but me to join the king at the banquet she had prepared. I'm also invited again tomorrow to join her with the king. Still, none of this satisfies me, since I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate all the time. Time reveals our character. And when we don't have a character that aligns with God, specifically if we're walking around with any pride, pride will always rob us of appreciation. You heard Haman. Everybody's gathered around. I have crazy wealth. Look at all my sons. Do you know I've been appointed higher than any other royal person in the kingdom? Matter of fact, nobody got invited to the king and queen's feast except me, and I'm getting invited a second feast. I'm heading there tomorrow. You can almost see on his chest, like, man, he's probably swelling up, getting big, and like, that's a great resume. But he's not satisfied. Because pride will always keep us searching for something to try to satisfy us, because we don't know how to be satisfied and we don't know how to be content, because as long as we're selfishly motivated, our character over time is going to always reveal that we want more and we want more and we want more. So here's what his friends and family said to him after he said that, I can't enjoy all this with Mordecai sitting there. They said, hey man, why don't you build a 75-foot spear and use that 75-foot long spear to impale Mordecai on and prop him up on it, kill him. Haman's like, that is a great idea. So he heads off to the king's court. And just as he's entering the king's court is about the time that the king had the history books being read to him. And he heard about Mordecai. And remember, he asked, hey, did we ever do anything for this guy, Mordecai? He saved my life. Did we ever do anything? As he's asking that question, Haman's bebopping into the king's court, ready to go talk to the king about killing Mordecai. And here's what happened. Esther chapter 6, verses 4 through 6. So the king asked, hey, who's in the court? Now Haman was just entering the outer court of the palace to ask the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared for him. The king's attendants answered him, Haman's there. He's standing right out in the court. Have him enter, the king ordered. Haman entered, and the king asked him, Haman, what should be done for the man the king wants to honor? Haman thought to himself, who is it the king would want to honor more than me? Ooh, boy, time reveals. Time reveals our character. And Haman has this moment of pride. He is riding that pride train like nobody's business. He's like, the king is asking me how to honor the person that deserves honor, and I know he's got to be talking about me, so I'm about to lay down some good stuff. Remember I told you that Mordecai got the royal robes, the royal horse, the royal headdress on the horse, was paraded around the town, pointing up to him saying, this is the guy. This is the type of guy that the king honors. Do you know who came up with all that? Haman. Because when he asked Haman what should be done, that's all Haman said. Guess who guided Mordecai around on that horse, pointed up to him? Haman. Haman. Pride in our character, when we're following pride, we always have this grandiose idea of how we think things should go. And the minute we think that we're heading in the right direction to get everything that we need is when we get knocked down and we're reminded that all the stuff that I wanted, I never got to, and it got destroyed because my pride got in the way. My character got in the way. It happens to Haman. I love how Proverbs 16:18 talks about this. It says, pride comes before destruction and an arrogant spirit before the fall. We read about Mordecai and we realize, oh man, Mordecai, you can really see how time reveals our heart. But then we turn around and we read about this guy Haman, and we're like, wow, it is really obvious how time will eventually reveal our character, and we're going to have to pay for the fruits of our character. And then we look at the final person in this story, the lady that this book of the Bible is written after. We look at Esther. And when we look at Esther, we find that time reveals our faith. Time reveals our faith. Esther has become queen. She was chosen out of all these other women. She's the queen. We've already been talking through Mordecai and Haman. They obviously have beef. And remember, Haman didn't just want to kill Mordecai. He wanted to kill all the Jews. And so here's what he did to make that plan happen. He went to the king and he said, hey, king, you got all these Jewish people in all these provinces, and they think different than us. They're not like us, and they're not going to follow anything that you say just because they're different. And a matter of fact, if you let me handle this situation, I will also put 10,000 talents. I'll put money in the king's treasury. And the king's like, oh, man, you're going to handle these people that aren't going to listen to me anyway, and you're going to pay me? And he took off his signet ring, and he gave it to Haman. Now, what this meant is that Haman now had the authority and the power of the king. Whatever he made, he put that signet ring stamp on it, it was done deal. So he created all this decree, and they sent it out to the 127 provinces, and basically it said, you can kill all the Jews. Husbands, wives, man, woman, children, everybody. You can kill them. You can just handle business and do all this stuff to them. Well, Mordecai found out, and he cries out in anguish. He's in sackcloth. He's mourning. A lot of the other Jews, when they hear about this, they're in mourning. And he says, oh, my gosh, I've got to get a message to Esther, because Esther doesn't know anything about this yet. She's in the king's palace. She hasn't gotten this decree out. She doesn't know about it. So he sends a message through one of the messengers to tell her that, hey, we're in big trouble, and we need you to talk to the king. And this was Esther's response in chapter 4, verse 10 and 11. Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to tell Mordecai, all the royal officials and all the people of the royal provinces, they know that one law applies to every man or woman who approaches the king in the inner courtyard that has not been summoned. The one law is that you get the death penalty, unless the king extends the gold scepter, allowing that person to live. I have not been summoned to appear before the king for the last 30 days. In other words, Esther's response to Mordecai is, hey, man, I don't know if you understand. It doesn't matter that I'm the queen. If you have not been invited and summoned by the king to be in his presence, and you show up, you could die. The only saving grace is that he has mercy and holds out that golden scepter, but he hasn't even called me in his presence for like 30 days, so I don't think he's looking for me to come around. Yeah, I appreciate it, Mordecai, but man, I'm just not sure about this one. Remember, time reveals faith. So Mordecai responds, and he encourages Esther. He says, hey, Esther, you never know. God might have you here for this time to do this very thing. You don't know that. And then he tells her, and Esther, I know that I've told you to keep hidden that you're a Jew, so they don't know you're a Jew. But when they find out you're a Jew, eventually, you're going to have to pay the piper. You're going to be killed too, because the king is not going to go against a decree that was made with his signet on it. And you'll eventually die. And this was Esther's response to Mordecai in chapter 4, verse 15. Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go and assemble all the Jews who can be found in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my female servants will also fast in the same way. And after that, I will go to the king, even if it is against the law. If I perish, I perish. Time reveals faith. Esther at first is like, that's not a good idea. But now she realizes, you know what? I'm backed into a corner. And I have some options. I can run from this that's in front of me and not do anything about it. I can come out of that corner and just be fighting and mad and swinging and, just whatever. Or I can finally just trust that maybe God has me here for a time such as this. And I will step out. I don't see or know what's going to happen. The king might kill me or he might extend his scepter. I'm going to step out on the unknown, and that's what faith is. And we see that Esther says, hey, if I perish, I perish, but I'm going to step out on faith. She does. The king extends the gold scepter. She's allowed to present her case before him, and she talks to the king, and the king says, hey, what do you want? I will give you anything. Just tell me what you want. Up to half of my kingdom. It's a blank check. She could just say, this is the problem. I need you to save my people. He's ready. But she says, hey, can we have dinner tomorrow night? Me, you, and Haman. And at that dinner, he asked her the same question. Esther, I will give you whatever you want, up to half of my kingdom. It's right there. Just say it, Esther. What do you want? And Esther says, can we have another dinner? Just me, you, and Haman? Like, I'm going, why are you not saying this? Maybe her faith is just building in those moments. As time goes by, she's slowly understanding, I can do this. I can trust God with this. God's going to meet me here. At that second feast, he says, Esther, what do you want? I'll give you up to half my kingdom. And Esther says, well, king, me and my people, the Jews, a decree has been made. They're out to get us, and they're going to kill everybody. There are people that are going against my people, and I'm scared for their life. And the person who has made all this happen is standing right here with us. And she points to Haman. The king gets up furious. It says he left the room they were in, and he actually went out into one of the garden areas at his palace. And when he left, Haman got afraid for his life. And Haman is like at the feet, right laying probably against Esther, just begging her, please, he's going to kill me. Well, the king decides to come in from the garden, and as he walks back into the palace from a distance, he sees Haman all up on top of Esther, and he's like, who is this guy that is trying to violate the queen? Have him killed. Do you know how Haman died? The people around the king said, hey, king, we know about this 75-foot stake that Haman built that's at his house, and he was going to kill that guy Mordecai. Remember Mordecai that saved you? He was going to kill him with it. And the king said, good, let's kill Haman with it. Esther and Mordecai are now good. The king has released them from any penalty. Mordecai has given all the land and everything that Haman had. But Esther realizes something. Her and Mordecai are safe and good, But those decrees are still out to the rest of the people. The rest of the Jews are still not safe because there is a piece of paper that says you can kill any Jew, and it has the king's signet on it, and that has not been retracted. And here's what Esther does in chapter 8, verses 3 through 4. Then Esther addressed the king again. She fell at his feet, wept, begged him to revoke the evil of Haman the Agagite and his plot he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the gold scepter toward Esther, so she got up and stood before the king. The first time Mordecai asked Esther to go before the king, she said, I can't. It's too hard. And then finally she decided to go. And her faith, I believe, began to start moving and working. And then she has an opportunity to tell the king about everything, and it still takes a little while to keep going. You ever had a hard time where you've stepped out in faith and God is saying, keep stepping, keep moving, and it's hard because you feel like nothing's happened yet? Finally, Esther gets up the faith to say, hey, this is what's going on. But then we see this moment. She's at another place where her going before the king is not something that she can just freely do. But it says without hesitation, she falls at his feet and cries, and he extends that gold scepter out. You see, I believe her faith had gotten so big that she had seen God move, and she understood that the next time I have an opportunity to step out on God, that he's worth stepping out on because he's going to protect me. He's going to give me a firm footing, even if it doesn't go the way I want to go it. I don't have to think about it. I know this is God, and I'm going to step out on it. If you will, stand to your feet with me. Way back in the Garden of Eden, when you read in Genesis, Adam and Eve, they had a protection by God because of their relationship with God. They felt very protected. And you see their feeling of protection in the fact that they walked around without any clothes on. There was a freedom like no other because they were protected. And the minute they decided to let pride creep in and do their own selfish thing and eat of that fruit they were told not to eat of, it says their eyes were open and they tried to hide themselves. And the reason why is because anytime we step into sin, we step out from underneath God's covering, and then all of a sudden we don't feel that freedom because we don't feel protected anymore. And they tried to cover themselves. And I love God because we see a great picture of the God who created the universe, the God who desires to have a relationship with us. We see a great picture of his heart in this moment. He lays out the consequences for the sin. There's consequences. But he doesn't just leave them there unprotected. He kills animals for the first time. And he kills them so that he can create garments to protect the people that he desired to have a relationship with. To remind them that though there is consequences for removing ourselves from the presence of God, that his presence is still seeking after us to grab us back into his protection, to put us underneath the span of his arms and say, baby girl, baby boy, I got something better for you. I want to protect you. Esther, she could step out because she felt that protection. She felt God's presence in that moment, and she could step out in faith. When Jesus died on the cross, one of the biggest reasons he died and he shed his blood for you and me, and he was raised from the dead, was because of protection. You see, God knew that there was no animal sacrifice that was good enough for him to protect us like he desired to protect you and me. And so he sent his son, and he said, when my son dies and his blood drains down that cross and he raises from the dead, then I'm going to create a way that every person, whoever wants it, can finally be protected. And under that protection, there's a freedom, there's restoration, there is a lift. We can operate and live with a heart like God. We can operate and live in the character of God. We can operate and live and have faith in God. If you will, close your eyes. My only question to you today is, do you feel protected, and are you protected by God's hand? The only way to do that is to accept that his son died for you and was raised from the dead for you. We talked about time being the great revealer. let this moment reveal your heart for God and your desire for him to protect you. On the count of 3, if you want that relationship with God, you want to be protected and get underneath his covering. Maybe you were under it and you stepped out and you want to get back under. Count of 3. I want you to just let God know that you want to get back by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3. Just throw that hand up right where you are. I see hands going up. Thank you. Thank you for honoring God. I see hands on this right side. Just throw it up. Say, God, I want your protection. I need your protection. I see your hand up top, sir. Just raise it up high. Once you've raised it, you can put it down. You've already let God know that you want that protection, and I get to see who we get to pray for. We're going to say a prayer, and I want you to repeat this prayer loud after me. If you raise your hand, or I want everybody to join in as an act of celebration, join in with this prayer with everyone that raised their hand. Say this, say, God, I love you, and I thank you for loving me. You sent your son, and he died for me and was raised from the dead for me because you wanted to protect me. So God, I choose that my heart and my character and my faith will always reveal your presence in my life. In Jesus' name, amen.